I used to think I was the luckiest man alive. Sitting here now, knowing what I know, it's almost laughable how naive I was. But back then, 17 years ago, when Sarah Williams said yes to my proposal, I genuinely believed I'd won the lottery. My name is Ethan Vance, and I'm 45 years old. I work as an electrical engineer at Power Grid Solutions, pulling in a solid salary. Not bad for a kid from nowhere who worked his way through college on scholarships and sheer stubbornness. But the real prize, I thought, was Sarah. Beautiful, ambitious Sarah who promised to build a life with me while I climbed the corporate ladder. The deal seemed perfect back then. She'd manage our home, create the foundation that would let me focus on providing for our future family. I'd be the breadwinner, she'd be the heart of our home. It was traditional, maybe old-fashioned, but it worked. Or so I believed. 4 years into our marriage, Liam came along. Our daughter was everything I'd dreamed of, curious, intelligent, with these piercing eyes that seemed to see everything. 6 years later, Jacob followed, a ball of energy who lit up every room he entered. I threw myself into being the provider they deserved. The comfortable suburban house with the white picket fence. The reliable income that meant Sarah never had to worry about bills. Weekend adventures, little league coaching, Saturday morning bookstore runs with Liam. I coached Jacob's baseball team every season, never missed a game. Those Saturday mornings with Liam at Barnes and Noble became sacred. She'd curl up in the children's section with a stack of books while I nursed my coffee, watching her absorb stories like a sponge. Those moments felt like pure gold. My family was my greatest achievement, more valuable than any promotion or project at work. Sarah seemed content in her role. She managed our household with military efficiency, attended every school event, maintained our social calendar. She was the perfect wife and mother, or so it appeared. I trusted her completely. When the late-night phone calls started, I didn't question them. When she suddenly developed an interest in her appearance, new clothes, gym memberships, expensive makeup, I was proud. She deserved to feel beautiful. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. The longer errands that stretched for hours, the distracted conversations where she'd check her phone mid-sentence, the way she'd retreat to another room for certain calls. But I was absorbed in a major infrastructure project at work, something that would secure our future for decades. The irony cuts deep now. While I was building a secure future for my family, my wife was building an escape route. I remember the exact moment I realized something had shifted. It was a Tuesday evening in October, and I'd worked late again, trying to finalize the project specifications. I walked through our front door expecting the usual chaos. Jacob's homework scattered on the kitchen table, Liam reading in her corner chair, Sarah preparing dinner while orchestrating the evening routine. Instead, I found silence. The house felt different, charged with an energy I couldn't identify. Sarah was sitting calmly on our living room couch, still wearing the dress she'd put on for her lunch with girlfriends. But her posture was wrong, too straight, too composed, and her expression, I'd never seen that look before. Cold, determined, distant. "We need to talk," she said firmly, and that's when I noticed her wedding ring was missing from her finger. What? The words hit me like a physical blow, but not the meaning. Not yet. I actually laughed. Standing there in my work clothes, briefcase still in hand, I laughed because surely this was some kind of elaborate joke. Maybe she was testing a line from some book she'd been reading or rehearsing dialogue for the community theater group she'd joined last spring. But Sarah's expression didn't change. That cold, determined mask remained perfectly in place. "I'm serious, Ethan. Sit down," she commanded, her voice steady and controlled. The briefcase slipped from my fingers, hitting the hardwood floor with a dull thud. I remained standing, my mind struggling to process what was happening. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. "I've been having an affair," she announced with chilling casualness, like she was discussing the weather. "His name is Anthony Thorne. I've been seeing him for 3 months. I'm in love with him." The room started spinning. I gripped the back of our armchair, the one we'd picked out together 8 years ago when we redecorated, to steady myself. "Sarah, what are you?" I started to protest. "I want a divorce," she cut me off, her voice gaining strength. "I've already consulted an attorney. I want full custody of the children, and I'm entitled to half of all marital assets. I'm moving out next week, and Anthony will be taking a more active role in the children's lives." The questions came tumbling out in desperate success. "Ian, why? What did I do wrong? When did this start? How could you throw away everything we built?" I pleaded, my voice breaking. But her answers were like surgical strikes, each one designed to inflict maximum damage. "I was bored, Ethan," she replied with disturbing calmness. "I felt entitled to happiness. Your constant work made me feel lonely and neglected. Anthony makes me feel alive in ways you never could. But what about our family? I asked desperately. What about everything we've built together? He understands my needs, my desires, my dreams for something bigger than suburban mediocrity. She answered dismissively, as if 17 years of marriage meant nothing. What about the kids? I managed to ask, my voice cracking. They'll adapt. Children are resilient, she replied coldly. I deserve custody because I've been their primary caregiver. You work 60 hours a week, Ethan. When was the last time you took Liam shopping or helped Jacob with homework? I've been raising them essentially as a single mother for years. Each justification was a knife twist, not because they were true, but because they contained just enough truth to sting. Yes, I worked long hours. Yes, I traveled occasionally for projects. But I'd done it all for them, for this family I was apparently losing. I spent that night in our guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling while Sarah slept peacefully in our marital bed. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years and drove straight to my lawyer's office. David Baker had handled our house purchase and wills. He was a family friend, someone I trusted completely. But the news he delivered was more devastating than anything Sarah had said the night before. Without proof of adultery directly affecting the children or evidence of gross misconduct, Sarah has the legal advantage, David explained, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by professional gravity. She's been the stay-at-home parent, the one who's always been present for school events, medical appointments, day-to-day care. Family courts typically favor the parent who can demonstrate consistent, hands-on involvement. The best I could hope for was joint custody and the standard 50-50 asset split. Even worse, I'd be paying child support and possibly alimony, money that would support Anthony Thorne's comfortable lifestyle in my former home with my children. But she's having an affair, I protested desperately. Doesn't that matter? David shook his head sadly. Not unless you can prove it's harmful to the children, and even then it's an uphill battle. Modern family law focuses on the best interests of the children, not punishing adultery, he replied with professional resignation. I left his office feeling hollow, defeated before the battle had even begun. Sarah had outmaneuvered me completely. While I'd been focused on building our future, she'd been planning my destruction with calculated precision. The next 2 weeks were hell. Sarah continued living in our house, preparing for her exit with cold efficiency. She packed her belongings methodically, sorted through photo albums like she was editing out our shared history, and spoke to me only when absolutely necessary about logistics. I tried to maintain normalcy for the kids, but I was drowning. Every morning felt like waking up in a nightmare I couldn't escape. I began documenting everything, tracking Sarah's movements, trying to gather evidence of the affair, recording our conversations when legally permissible. But Anthony was careful, Sarah was strategic, and I came up empty-handed time and time again. The children noticed the tension but didn't understand the full scope of what was happening. Jacob, my energetic 10-year-old, kept asking why Mommy and Daddy weren't talking. Liam, always observant, had grown unusually quiet, spending more time in her room than usual. It was during one of those long, sleepless nights that I noticed something strange. I'd gotten up around midnight for a glass of water when I heard Sarah's voice coming from the kitchen. She was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones, but her laughter carried through the house, a sound I hadn't heard directed at me in months. As I crept closer, I caught fragments of the conversation that made my blood run cold. "The attorney says it'll be easy," she whispered into the phone. "Absent workaholic father, primary caregiver advantage. Take everything he worked for." I retreated to the guest bedroom, my hands shaking with rage and despair. But as I lay there in the dark, I became aware of a soft sound in the hallway, footsteps that were too light to be Sarah's. The next evening, as I sat in my makeshift bedroom reviewing legal documents that detailed my impending loss, I found Liam standing in the doorway. My 14-year-old daughter looked at me with an expression far too mature for her years, her eyes reflecting an understanding that chilled me. "Dad," she whispered, glancing back toward the hallway to ensure we weren't overheard, "I won't let her take us away from you." What I didn't understand then was that Liam had been watching, learning, and planning long before I even knew there was a war to fight. My brilliant daughter, who inherited my methodical mind and analytical nature, had noticed the changes in her mother months before the separation was announced. Unlike me, blinded by trust and work obligations, Liam saw everything with the clear eyes of an intelligent teenager who understood more about adult behavior than any child should have to. The secretive phone calls that ended abruptly when anyone entered the room. The new clothes that appeared in Sarah's closet. Expensive pieces that didn't match our family budget discussions. The way Sarah would leave for errands and return hours later smelling different, carrying the lingering scent of expensive cologne that definitely wasn't my drugstore brand. When Sarah finally announced the divorce that evening, Liam told me later, she wasn't shocked. She was terrified. Because unlike Jacob, who was too young to understand the implications, Liam immediately grasped what it meant. Their father would lose them. In the weeks following Sarah's announcement, while I was struggling to find evidence and legal advantages, Liam was conducting her own investigation with the methodical precision of someone who had everything to lose. She listened at doors, positioning herself strategically during her mother's phone calls. She read text messages when Sarah left her phone unattended, something that happened more frequently as Sarah grew careless in her confidence. The picture that emerged from Liam's surveillance was even worse than I'd imagined. She overheard Sarah's strategy sessions with her attorney, discussions about how to paint me as the absent workaholic who prioritized career over family. She listened to Sarah actually laugh, about how easy it would be to take everything he worked for and start fresh with Anthony. But it was Anthony himself who sealed Liam's resolve. When he started visiting my house, Liam observed him with the careful attention of a wildlife biologist studying a dangerous predator. Anthony Thorne was everything that disgusted her. Arrogant, unemployed, clearly planning to live comfortably off Sarah's anticipated divorce settlement. Worse than his character was his attitude toward the children he'd soon be helping to raise. Anthony made no effort to connect with Jacob, treating him like an annoying obstacle to his alone time with Sarah. But his interaction with Liam was even more troubling. During one afternoon visit, when Sarah had stepped out to take a call, Anthony cornered Liam in the kitchen. "You know, this transition will be easier for everyone if certain people don't get in the way," he said casually, but his eyes were cold. "Your mother and I are building something here. Smart kids understand how to adapt to new situations." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Liam understood that Anthony saw her intelligence as a potential problem, her observant nature as something that needed to be managed or suppressed. That night, Liam began researching custody law on her school laptop. She studied family court procedures, burden of proof requirements, and the factors that could shift custody decisions. She learned about the legal standards courts used, the precedents that guided judges' decisions, and most importantly, she discovered what could immediately disqualify a parent from custody. Evidence of child abuse or endangerment could trump every other factor in a custody case. The legal battle dragged on for 6 months, each court date bringing me closer to losing everything that mattered. Sarah's attorney was skilled and ruthless, successfully painting me as the workaholic who had prioritized career advancement over family connection. My own attorney, despite his best efforts, couldn't overcome the fundamental disadvantage. Sarah had been the hands-on parent, the one who knew the children's teachers, friends, and daily routines. I watched helplessly as the custody decision tipped increasingly in Sarah's favor. The judge seemed genuinely sympathetic to my situation, but bound by legal precedent and the evidence presented. I was facing joint custody at best, significant asset loss, and ongoing support payments that would fund Anthony's lifestyle while my children lived in a home where their father was unwelcome. The final hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in May. David Baker had prepared me for the worst-case scenario, explaining that barring some dramatic revelation, the court would likely award primary custody to Sarah with standard visitation rights for me. 2 weeks before that final hearing, Liam approached her best friend Maya with an unusual request. Maya was known throughout their school for her incredible skill with theater makeup and special effects, talents she'd developed. Through years of involvement in drama productions and a natural artistic ability that had won her multiple awards. "I need you to make bruises," Liam told her friend during lunch one day, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was proposing. "Bruises that will save my father's life." Maya, loyal and trusting, didn't ask too many questions. She understood that her friend was desperate, that something terrible was happening to Liam's family. "What kind of bruises?" Maya asked quietly, leaning closer across the cafeteria table. "The kind that look like someone grabbed me too hard," Liam replied calmly. "And maybe a burn mark, something that proves we're not safe." Over the course of the following week, Maya helped Liam create convincing evidence of abuse, layering theatrical pigments to create authentic-looking contusions that followed the pattern of adult fingerprints. Using techniques she'd learned from professional makeup artists and online tutorials. "Are you sure about this?" Maya whispered as she applied the final touches. "This could get people in serious trouble." "People who deserve serious trouble," Liam answered with determination. "My dad is going to lose us, and it's not fair." The final touch was the most painful. A linear burn mark that Liam inflicted on herself by pressing the flat edge of a clothing iron against her shoulder blade, holding it just long enough to create a lasting mark that would convince medical examiners. As the final hearing approached, Liam prepared for the performance of her young life, one that would either save her family or destroy it completely. The family court building felt like a tomb that Thursday morning. I sat beside David Baker in courtroom 4B, my hands trembling slightly as I watched Sarah take her place across the aisle with her attorney and Anthony by her side. Having Anthony present was a tactical error that would soon prove costly, but at that moment, his smug confidence only added to my despair. Judge Emma Smith presided, a seasoned family court judge with 20 years of experience. She'd heard it all before: bitter divorces, custody battles, adults using children as weapons against each other. Her expression suggested this was just another day in her courtroom. The proceedings began with standard testimony and financial disclosures. Sarah's attorney, Mitchell Reynolds, painted a compelling picture of devoted motherhood sacrificed for family stability. He presented Sarah as the parent who'd given up career ambitions to provide hands-on care, who knew every detail of the children's lives while I remained buried in work obligations. "Mrs. Vance has been the primary caregiver for both children since their births," Reynolds argued, his voice filled with righteous conviction. "She's attended every parent-teacher conference, every medical appointment, every school event. While Mr. Vance was building his career, Mrs. Vance was building relationships with their children. When David cross-examined Sarah, she performed beautifully, the picture of a wronged wife who'd finally found the courage to leave an absent husband. She admitted to the affair but framed it as the inevitable result of years of emotional neglect. Anthony, she claimed, had simply provided the emotional support I'd failed to give. "I deserve to be happy," Sarah testified, her eyes filling with practiced tears. "I deserve a partner who values our family enough to be present for it." Judge Smith nodded sympathetically, making notes that I was certain spelled my doom. The proceedings moved to financial assessments and character witnesses. Everything was unfolding exactly as David had predicted. Sarah's legal advantage was overwhelming. I could feel my children slipping away with each passing moment. Then Judge Smith called for the children's testimony. Jacob was questioned first. My 10-year-old son, looking small and nervous in his best button-down shirt, answered the judge's questions clearly. "Jacob, where would you prefer to live?" Judge Smith asked gently. "With my dad," he replied without hesitation, his voice small but certain. "Do you understand that your parents won't be living together anymore?" she continued. "Yes, ma'am," he answered quietly. "I just don't understand why we can't all live together like before." His preference was noted, but, as the judge explained, his age meant his wishes were just one factor among many. Liam was called next. My 14-year-old daughter walked to the witness area with a composure that struck me as unusual, even for her naturally serious demeanor. She answered the standard questions calmly. "Liam, both you and your brother have expressed a preference to live with your father. Can you tell me why?" Judge Smith inquired. "Both Jacob and I prefer to live with our father," she replied steadily. "Neither of us have any concerns about his ability to care for us." "And what about your mother? Do you have any concerns about living with her?" the judge asked. "No concerns about her ability," Liam answered carefully. Judge Smith began moving toward what seemed like the inevitable joint custody ruling, citing the children's ages and the importance of maintaining relationships with both parents despite the marriage's dissolution. Then Liam raised her hand. "Your Honor, I have something to show you," she said, her voice cutting through the formal atmosphere. The courtroom fell into complete silence. Even the court reporter looked up from her machine. Judge Smith's eyebrows raised slightly. Children interrupting proceedings was highly unusual. "What is it, dear?" the judge asked with curiosity. With movements that seemed both deliberate and trembling, Liam walked toward the bench. She rolled up the sleeves of her cardigan methodically, revealing angry red and purple bruise marks on both forearms, contusions that were clearly in the shape of adult fingers, as if someone had gripped her arms violently. A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom, Sarah's face drained of all color. But Liam wasn't finished. She turned slightly, lowering her shirt collar to reveal a linear burn mark on her shoulder blade, a mark that looked exactly like what it was supposed to represent: deliberate abuse with a heated object. "My mother and Anthony hurt us," Liam stated, her voice trembling but filled with conviction. "They told us that if we ever told anyone, Dad would go to jail and we'd be sent away to foster care. They said nobody would believe us because Mom was the good parent and Dad was never home to protect us." The explosion that followed was immediate and visceral. Sarah shot to her feet, her composure finally cracking completely. "That's not true," she screamed desperately. "She's lying, I would never." My reaction was purely instinctual. The moment I processed what my daughter had revealed, rage consumed me completely. I roared with the primal fury of a father who believes his children have been abused, lunging across the table toward Anthony with murder in my eyes. "You son of a bitch," I shouted as court officers moved to restrain me. I'll kill you, I'll kill you." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Anthony tried to shrink into his chair, his earlier arrogance evaporating as he faced the very real possibility of a lynch mob. Sarah continued screaming denials while her attorney frantically tried to maintain control of the situation. "She's making it up," Sarah cried out frantically. "This is some kind of manipulation. Ethan put her up to this." "I would never hurt my children," Anthony protested loudly, his voice cracking with panic. Judge Smith's gavel crashed repeatedly as she called for order, her voice cutting through the chaos with practiced authority. "Order, order in my courtroom," she commanded sternly. She turned to face the court officers. "Remove Mr. Vance to the hallway until he can control himself. Mrs. Vance, sit down immediately or you'll be held in contempt." As I was escorted out, still struggling against the officer's grip, I caught one last glimpse of Liam. My daughter stood perfectly still at the bench, tears streaming down her face. Whether from fear, relief, or the weight of what she'd just done, I couldn't tell. Judge Smith immediately called for an adjournment. She ordered both children placed temporarily with Child Protective Services, pending a complete medical and forensic examination of the abuse allegations. Emergency protective orders were issued barring Sarah and Anthony from any contact with the children. Within 2 hours, formal charges had been filed: felony child endangerment, child abuse, and conspiracy to commit child abuse. Sarah and Anthony were both detained, processed, and released on bail with strict conditions. Sarah's carefully constructed image as the devoted mother lay in ruins, replaced by the specter of a woman who had endangered her own children for the sake of her lover. The custody battle that had seemed hopeless just hours before was now completely reversed. As I left the courthouse that afternoon, David Baker pulled me aside. "I don't know how those injuries happened," he said quietly, his eyes meeting mine with an expression I couldn't quite read. "And I don't want to know, but your daughter just saved everything you worked for. Don't ask questions you don't want answered." What? 2 months have passed since that day in court, and the transformation of our lives has been nothing short of miraculous, or perhaps tragic, depending on your perspective on what Liam sacrificed to achieve it. The medical examination confirmed what the court needed to hear. The injuries were consistent with deliberate abuse. The bruising patterns matched adult hand sizes, and the burn mark appeared to be from a heated metal object applied with intentional pressure. The forensic team couldn't definitively prove who had inflicted the injuries, but the timing, the children's testimony, and Sarah's complete lack of credible defense created an overwhelming case against her. Judge Smith's final ruling was swift and decisive. Full custody to me, a 70-30 asset split in my favor due to Sarah's criminal behavior and destruction of the family unit, and mandatory supervised visitation for Sarah pending the outcome of her criminal trial. Sarah's parental rights were suspended indefinitely. Faced with the possibility of a lengthy prison sentence and complete financial ruin, Sarah accepted a plea deal: 3 years in minimum security prison for child endangerment, permanent loss of custody rights, and no claim to any marital assets beyond the 30% already allocated by the court. Anthony, facing separate charges and unable to afford proper legal defense, received a 5-year sentence. We moved into a new home in the neighboring Riverside district, smaller than our previous house, but it's ours, untainted by memories of betrayal and deception. I negotiated a reduced work schedule with Power Grid Solutions, accepting a pay cut in exchange for flexible hours that let me be present for the children. I hired Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher, to provide after-school care when my schedule requires it. The three of us entered intensive family counseling with Dr. Alina Rodriguez, working through the trauma of the court battle, Sarah's betrayal, and the complex emotions surrounding our new life. Jacob, resilient as children often are, has adapted well. He misses his mother but seems to understand that she made choices that hurt our family. His trust in me has only grown stronger. Liam, however, carries the weight of her actions in ways that both inspire and terrify me. She's thrived academically, earning straight A's and taking on leadership roles in school activities. But sometimes I catch her staring into space with an expression far too mature for a 15-year-old, and I wonder what the cost of her sacrifice truly was. Tonight, as we sit together on our new couch watching a movie, a routine we're still building in this house that's slowly becoming home, I finally ask the question that's been haunting me for months. Liam, I say quietly, pausing the movie and pulling her close, I need to ask you something and I need the truth. Those bruises, how did they really happen? She looks up at me, and for a moment I see not my 15-year-old daughter but someone much older, someone who made an impossible choice to protect the people she loved. After a long pause, she tells me everything. I watched Mom for months before she told us about the divorce, she begins carefully. I saw the phone calls, the new clothes, the way she acted different. I knew something was wrong. Why didn't you tell me? I asked gently. Because I thought you already knew and were just pretending everything was okay, she replies with mature honesty. When she finally announced the divorce, I wasn't shocked. I was scared, because I understood what it meant. We were going to lose you. She describes the months of surveillance, documenting Sarah's affair and legal strategy, the research into custody law and the factors that could shift a court's decision, the realization that traditional evidence wouldn't be enough, that we needed something irrefutable to overcome Sarah's legal advantages. I researched everything, she explains with scientific detachment. Family court precedents, custody factors, what evidence actually matters. I realized that unless we had proof of danger to us kids, the court would give Mom custody because she was home more. So you decided to create that proof? I ask, though I already know the answer. I decided to save our family, she replies firmly. Maya helped me understand how real bruises develop, the color progression, the way skin reacts to different types of pressure. We practiced for hours to get the fingerprint pattern right. The methodical precision of her plan is both brilliant and horrifying, but it's her description of the burn that breaks my heart. That was the hardest part, she admits quietly. I stood in the bathroom at 2 in the morning, holding the iron, knowing that the pain I was about to feel might save us. It had to look real enough to convince doctors. Jesus, Liam, I whisper, holding her tighter. I love you, Dad, she continues, her voice steady despite the weight of her confession. You worked so hard for us. You gave us everything. A home, security, all those Saturday mornings at the bookstore, coaching Jacob's team, being there when it really mattered. I couldn't let her take it all away just because the law was broken. Sometimes the only way to get justice is to create your own evidence. I'm torn between horror at what she endured, the planning, the self-harm, the perjury in court, and overwhelming gratitude that she saved our family. What she did was illegal, potentially devastating if the truth ever emerged. But I also know that Sarah's betrayal was real, that Anthony posed a genuine threat to my children's well-being, and that the courts would have failed us without intervention. What you did was incredibly brave and incredibly dangerous, I tell her honestly. I'm proud of how much you love our family, but I never want you to hurt yourself for anyone ever again. I won't have to, she replies with quiet confidence. You're here now, you're protecting us. I will never tell anyone what you just told me, I promise her, my voice thick with emotion. And you will never have to do anything like that again because I will always protect you both now. Always. As I reflect on these past months, I'm forced to confront uncomfortable truths about justice, morality, and the lengths we'll go to protect the people we love. What Liam did was technically fraud, but Sarah's betrayal was emotionally devastating, and Anthony's presence in my children's lives would have been genuinely harmful. Justice isn't always clean. Sometimes it's a brilliant, necessary lie told by a desperate teenager who loved her father more than she feared the consequences. Sometimes the system fails, and ordinary people have to create their own solutions. We're healing now, We're rebuilding. Jacob's laughter fills our new house, and I never miss his baseball games. Liam and I still have our Saturday bookstore mornings, though now they carry the weight of shared secrets and unspoken understanding. She's applying to colleges, brilliant and driven, carrying scars that no one else can see. Sarah serves her sentence in minimum security, reportedly a model prisoner who maintains her innocence. Anthony was released after 18 months for good behavior and has disappeared from our city entirely. They've paid their price for the destruction they caused, or at least, the destruction they were found guilty of causing. We are moving forward, carrying a secret that binds us together forever. Not just the truth about the bruises, but the deeper truth that sometimes love requires terrible choices, and sometimes protecting your family means dancing with darkness. The wicked have paid their price, and Ethan, Liam, and Jacob are moving forward, a family forged not just by blood, but by loyalty, sacrifice, and the kind of love that refuses to accept defeat. Some might call what we did wrong, others might call it justice, I call it survival, and I regret nothing. My name is Derek Haynes. I'm 37 years old, a senior financial analyst at Westbridge Financial Group, and until 3 months ago, I believed I had a good marriage. I earn $89,000 a year analyzing investment portfolios and market trends. Numbers don't lie. That's what I've always loved about my job. Data tells you the truth, whether you want to hear it or not. People, on the other hand, can be remarkably deceptive. I met Allison Porter 5 years ago at our mutual friend Sarah's birthday party. I was the college roommate who showed up late with a bottle of wine, and Allison was Sarah's coworker's plus one, stunning, confident, laughing at something someone had said across the room. She had this way of tilting her head when she listened, like she was genuinely interested in every word. That night, we talked until the party ended and most people had gone home. The chemistry was immediate and undeniable. She was 30 then, working as a marketing assistant at a boutique advertising firm. I was climbing the corporate ladder, focused but lonely. We balanced each other perfectly, her spontaneity against my careful planning, her creativity against my analytical mind. After a year of dating, I knew she was the one. We married at a beautiful vineyard ceremony 2 hours outside the city. Her parents, Richard and Joan Porter, were gracious hosts who seemed genuinely happy to welcome me into their family. The wedding photos still sit on our mantle, Allison in her flowing white dress, me in my navy suit, both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. Those early years were genuinely good. We weren't just playing house, we were building something real together. We traveled, long weekends in wine country, a 2-week trip to Europe that maxed out our credit cards but created memories I still treasure. We hosted dinner parties in the condo I'd purchased 6 years ago before I even met her. Allison would spend hours planning menus and arranging flowers, transforming our space into something warm and inviting. We talked about children, but always with the phrase, "when the time is right." Allison would stroke my arm and say, "I want us to have more time together first, just us," she would tell me with gentle certainty. I respected that. I loved our freedom, our late-night conversations, our ability to be spontaneous. 2 years into our marriage, Allison made an announcement that seemed completely reasonable at the time. "I'm burned out at work," she said over breakfast one Saturday morning. "The agency is demanding impossible deadlines, my boss is a micromanaging nightmare, and honestly, Derek, I want to focus on us. On making our home a sanctuary," she explained with frustration clear in her voice. I was supportive, we were financially stable. My salary could cover our expenses comfortably, and if she needed a break from the corporate grind, why not? "We're comfortable," I told her, kissing her forehead. "Whatever you need." So Allison quit her job. She threw herself into redecorating our condo with an enthusiasm I found endearing. She joined an upscale gym, Fitness Elite, $200 a month, and started taking yoga classes. She seemed happier, more relaxed. The first change happened about 3 months ago. Allison started greeting me every evening with fresh coffee. Not just any coffee, she'd invested in an expensive espresso machine and would have a perfect cup waiting when I walked through the door. "Thought you could use a pick-me-up after your long day," she'd say, handing me the steaming mug with a smile that seemed genuinely caring. It was a sweet gesture, thoughtful wife behavior, except something strange started happening. Within 20 minutes of drinking Allison's coffee, an overwhelming exhaustion would hit me. Not normal tiredness. This was bone-deep, can't-keep-my-eyes-open fatigue that came on like a freight train. I'd barely make it to the couch before consciousness would slip away completely. I'd wake up hours later, Midnight 2 a.m., sometimes 3 a.m., sprawled on the living room furniture with pounding headaches and disorientation that felt almost like a hangover. Allison would be asleep in our bedroom, and I'd stumble there, confused and exhausted. "You're working too hard," she'd say the next morning, concern creasing her features. "Your body is telling you to slow down," she would insist with what seemed like genuine worry. I wanted to believe her. I've handled stress before, college finals, major presentations, market crashes that kept me at the office until midnight for weeks. But I'd never experienced anything like this systematic collapse that seemed to happen only at home, only in the evenings, only after Allison's coffee. But late at night, when I'd finally make it to bed and lie staring at the ceiling while Allison slept peacefully beside me, a single thought would crystallize in the darkness. What if she's doing this on purpose? What? I've spent 12 years analyzing financial data for Westbridge Financial. My job is identifying patterns that others miss, market trends, investment anomalies, the subtle shifts that indicate when something is fundamentally wrong beneath the surface. It's pattern recognition at its most essential level. So when that thought crystallized in my mind, what if she's doing this on purpose? My analytical training kicked in automatically. If something was wrong with my marriage, I needed data, hard evidence, proof that would either confirm my suspicions or put them to rest once and for all. I started documenting everything. I bought a small notebook that I kept locked in my desk drawer at work. Every day I recorded the details. What time I got home, whether Allison offered me coffee, what time I drank it when the exhaustion hit, when I woke up, how I felt the next morning. The pattern that emerged was disturbingly consistent. Coffee offered every single evening. Time consumed always between 8:15 and 8:45 p.m. Unconsciousness onset within 15 to 20 minutes. Wake-up time between midnight and 3 a.m. Physical symptoms, headache, disorientation, cotton mouth. Frequency, 100% correlation. But here's what made the pattern truly damning. The exhaustion only occurred on nights when I drank Allison's coffee. On the rare occasions when I made my own coffee or grabbed a cup at work, nothing happened. When we went out to dinner and I had coffee at restaurants, I remained alert all evening. I started noticing other changes in her behavior. Allison seemed happier lately. She had a glow about her that I initially attributed to her newfound freedom from corporate stress. She'd lost weight, maybe 15 pounds, and was dressing nicer, even when she had no plans to leave the house. She spent more time on her appearance, investing in expensive skincare products and a new wardrobe. When I asked about her day, her answers had become increasingly vague. "Just errands, hit the gym, the usual," she would reply dismissively, but she never offered specifics anymore. Her phone behavior had changed too. It used to sit casually on the counter, sometimes lighting up with text notifications that neither of us thought twice about. Now it was always face down. She'd password-protected everything. When calls came in, she'd step into another room to answer them, speaking in hushed tones. One day, I mentioned casually that I might work from home the following Friday. Allison's reaction was immediate and telling. "No," she exclaimed sharply. The word came out harsher than she'd intended. She caught herself, forcing a smile. "I mean, I have plans, the place will be messy, maybe next week," she backtracked quickly. The panic in her voice was barely concealed. In 5 years together, Allison had never cared about the state of our condo. But the moment that confirmed my worst suspicions happened on a Thursday evening. I'd drunk her coffee and was pretending to be more affected than I actually was, letting my breathing slow and my head drop forward. Through slitted eyes, I watched Allison approach the couch where I sat. She checked my pulse at my wrist, the touch clinical and detached. Then she waved her hand directly in front of my face, watching for any reaction. When I didn't respond, she smiled, not the loving smile of a concerned wife, but something predatory and satisfied. She pulled out her phone and typed a text message. I couldn't see the screen, but I could see her expression as she typed. It was the look of someone who had just confirmed that a plan was proceeding perfectly. I also started noticing financial anomalies. The gym membership was expensive, $200 a month for Fitness Elite. But when I reviewed our credit card statements, I noticed regular charges at the gym's cafe, always mid-morning, always for 2 specialty coffee drinks. Allison didn't drink coffee during the day. Who was she buying that second coffee for? I considered confronting her directly, but my instincts told me I needed more than suspicions and partial evidence. I called Nathan Cross, an old college friend who'd become a successful divorce attorney. Hypothetically, I said carefully during our lunch meeting, what would someone need to prove adultery in divorce proceedings? Nathan studied my face carefully. This isn't hypothetical, is it? He asked with concern. I didn't answer directly. What would they need? I pressed. Documentation. Photos, videos, financial records, witness testimony. Something that proves the affair beyond any reasonable doubt, he explained seriously. He leaned forward. Derek, if you're going through this, you need to be smart about it. Document everything, but don't do anything stupid, he warned firmly. The final piece of the puzzle clicked when I glimpsed her phone screen as she set it on the counter. A text preview showed just enough to confirm what I'd been dreading. Kyle flexed biceps. Can't wait for tonight, he out yet. Standing in the electronics S. Toward the next day, holding a package of wireless security cameras, the cashier asked, "Home security." "Something like that," I replied. But in my mind, I was thinking, I'm about to find out what my wife really does when I'm unconscious. What? Saturday morning arrived gray and overcast, matching my mood perfectly. Allison announced over breakfast that she was going shopping and would be gone for several hours. "I need to hit 3 different stores," she said, checking her phone. "That new boutique downtown, then the home goods place for throw pillows, and I want to stop by the farmer's market before it closes. Probably won't be back until 4 or 5, she explained casually. I nodded, making appropriate husband noises about her having fun and not spending too much. Inside, I felt nothing but cold determination. She was giving me exactly the window I needed. The moment her car pulled out of our parking garage, I retrieved the package of wireless security cameras from my office closet. 4 cameras total, small, motion-activated, streaming to a cloud account that only I could access. I'd done my research. These particular models were designed to be virtually invisible unless someone was specifically looking for them. I installed the first camera in the living room, positioned behind a decorative plant where it had a clear view of the couch and front door. The second went in the kitchen, tucked between cookbooks on a shelf that overlooked both the coffee station and the breakfast bar. The third camera I mounted in the hallway, disguised as part of a picture frame arrangement that would capture anyone moving between the living areas and the bedroom. The fourth camera was the most important. I installed it in our bedroom, hidden inside a charging dock on the dresser that had a direct line of sight to the bed. I tested each camera meticulously, checking angles, adjusting positions, ensuring the Wi-Fi connections were stable. The feeds came through crystal clear on my phone. Every inch of our condo's main living areas was now under surveillance. By the time Allison returned at 5:30, I was sitting on the couch reading financial reports as if I'd been there all afternoon. She kissed my cheek, chatted about her successful shopping expedition, and began preparing dinner. Everything seemed perfectly normal. That evening, Allison appeared beside the couch at exactly 8:30 with a steaming cup of coffee. Her smile was bright and loving. "Long day?" she asked sweetly, settling beside me as I took the mug. "The usual," I replied casually, drinking deeply. The coffee was perfectly prepared, rich, smooth, with just the right amount of cream. It would have been a lovely gesture from a wife who actually cared about my well-being. I sat back, turning on the television, letting myself sink into the couch cushions. Within 20 minutes, the familiar heavy-limbed exhaustion began to overtake me. My vision blurred at the edges. My hands felt disconnected from my arms. My head grew impossibly heavy. I passed out completely. I woke at 2:30 a.m., sprawled across the couch with a pounding headache and the taste of cotton in my mouth. Allison was asleep in our bedroom, breathing deeply and peacefully. With shaking hands, though whether from residual drug effects or anticipation, I couldn't tell, I pulled out my phone and opened the security app. The footage was waiting for me. 8:47 p.m., Derek drinks coffee, settles on couch with TV remote. 8:52 p.m., Derek's movements become sluggish, head nodding. 9:03 p.m., Derek's head drops forward. No movement for 30 seconds. He's unconscious. I fast-forwarded slightly. 9:15 p.m., Allison approaches the couch. She reaches for Derek's wrist, checking his pulse with practiced efficiency. She waves her hand directly in front of his face, watching for any reaction. When there is none, she smiles, a satisfied, predatory expression I've never seen before. 9:20 p.m., Allison pulls out her phone and sends a text message. She types quickly, then sits back to wait. 9:35 p.m., the front door opens. A man walks in without knocking, clearly expected. He's tall, muscular, mid-30s with dark hair and the confident stride of someone who belongs in gyms and fitness magazines. I recognize him immediately. Kyle Brennan, Allison's personal trainer from Fitness Elite. 9:37 p.m. Kyle and Allison embrace in our living room, their kiss passionate and familiar. This isn't a new relationship. They move together with the comfort of established lovers. Kyle glances down at my unconscious form and says something that makes Allison laugh. Even without audio, I can see the contempt in his expression, the way he looks at me like I'm pathetic debris in their path. 9:42 p.m. They walk toward our bedroom, Kyle's hand on Allison's lower back in a gesture of casual ownership. 9:45 p.m. The bedroom door closes. I fast forward through the next 2 hours, my hands trembling with a rage so pure it feels like ice in my veins. At 11:05 p.m., Kyle emerges from the bedroom, pulling on his clothes. Allison follows, wearing a silk robe I bought her for our anniversary. They kiss again at the front door, his hands tangling in her hair. 11:56 p.m., Kyle leaves. Allison watches him go, then locks the door behind him. 11:58 p.m., Allison climbs into our bed and goes to sleep, as peaceful as if she'd spent the evening reading. I watched the entire sequence 3 times. Each viewing intensifies my fury, but also my resolve. My wife had drugged me unconscious. She'd brought her lover into our home, our bedroom, our bed, and they'd laughed at my unconscious body lying mere feet away. But I don't confront her. Not yet. I need more than video evidence. I need proof that will hold up in court, evidence so overwhelming that no lawyer could create reasonable doubt. The next morning, I act completely normal. I kiss Allison goodbye, tell her I love her, head to work as if nothing has changed. But inside, I'm calculating, planning, building an unshakable case. That evening, she brings me coffee again. This time, before the drug takes full effect, I manage to save half the mug's contents in a sealed container while Allison is in the shower. I document the chain of custody with photographs, date stamps, and detailed notes about the collection process. 3 days later, I send the sample to Mitchell Forensics, a private lab that Nathan had recommended for divorce cases requiring toxicology evidence. The results arrive via encrypted email. Zolpidem, Ambien, 20 mg concentration, enough to render an average adult unconscious for 4 to 6 hours. The report notes that this dosage level indicates intentional administration rather than accidental contamination. Intentional criminal. I call Nathan immediately. I need to see you, emergency, I tell him urgently. In Nathan's downtown office, I present everything. The security footage on my phone, the forensic report, the financial records showing Allison's gym expenses, and the mysterious double coffee purchases. Nathan's expression grows progressively harder as he reviews each piece of evidence. Jesus Christ, Derek, he says, leaning back in his chair, processing what he's seen. This isn't just adultery, this is assault, possibly attempted poisoning. With this evidence, the district attorney could press criminal charges that would stick, he explains gravely. What are my options? I ask. My voice is steady, but Nathan can hear the steel underneath. Divorce-wise, this is a slam dunk. Adultery, drugging, reckless endangerment, she won't see a penny in the settlement. But Derek, you could also pursue criminal charges. Assault, reckless endangerment, illegal drug administration. They're looking at potential jail time, he outlines carefully. I stand up, straightening my suit jacket. I want them destroyed, both of them, I state coldly. Nathan leans forward, studying my expression. What exactly are you planning? He asks with concern. I'm going to catch them in the act one more time, and I'm going to make sure they regret ever touching what was mine, I reply with quiet determination. Nathan's voice carries a note of warning. Derek, don't do anything that could jeopardize the legal case. Don't give them ammunition to use against you, he cautions seriously. I meet his eyes directly. 2 nights from now this ends. Make sure the police are ready for my call, I tell him firmly. I walk out of his office, leaving Nathan staring after me. I know he's concerned about what I might do, but he doesn't understand. I'm not planning to jeopardize anything. I'm planning to ensure that justice is served with the kind of finality that neither Allison nor Kyle will ever forget. 2 nights later, I arrived home from work at exactly 6:15 p.m., the same time I'd been coming home for the past 5 years. My hands were steady as I turned the key in the lock, but underneath my calm exterior, Every nerve was alive with anticipation. Allison greeted me at the door with her practiced smile, wearing a black dress I'd never seen before that hugged her newly toned figure. She'd spent extra time on her hair and makeup today, I noticed. She was preparing for her performance. "Rough day?" she asked sweetly, taking my briefcase and setting it by the door. "The usual quarterly reports," I replied evenly, loosening my tie. "Nothing I couldn't handle." She disappeared into the kitchen, and I could hear the familiar sounds of the espresso machine grinding and brewing. 5 minutes later, she appeared beside the couch with a steaming mug, her smile warm and concerned. "Thought you could use a pick-me-up after your long day," she said lovingly. I took the mug with both hands, letting my fingers brush against hers in the gesture of a loving husband. The coffee was perfectly prepared, as always. Steam rose from the surface, carrying the rich aroma that had once been comforting and was now associated with violation and betrayal. I walked to the couch, TT led into my usual spot and turned on the television. When Allison turned away to tidy the kitchen, I poured every drop of the drugged coffee into the large potted fern beside the couch. The plant had been absorbing Allison's poison for days now. Its leaves were starting to yellow, but it would survive long enough to serve as evidence. I sat back, letting my breathing slow gradually, allowing my head to drop forward in stages. Weeks of watching my own unconsciousness on security footage had taught me exactly how the drug was supposed to affect me. Within 15 minutes, I heard Allison's footsteps approaching. I kept my breathing deep and regular as she reached for my wrist, checking my pulse with the clinical efficiency she'd developed over months of practice. She waved her hand in front of my face, waiting for any sign of consciousness. When I didn't react, she whispered a single word that chilled my blood: "Perfect." The satisfaction in her voice was unmistakable. This wasn't just about the affair. She enjoyed drugging me. She took pleasure in my unconsciousness, in the power it gave her over my life. She pulled out her phone and typed a message. I could hear her moving around the living room, probably tidying up, preparing our home for her lover's arrival. 10 minutes later, the front door opened. Kyle Brennan walked in without knocking, as comfortable in my home as if he lived there. "He out?" Kyle asked casually, his voice carrying the tone of someone discussing the weather. "Like a light," Allison responded confidently. "I used a little extra tonight. He won't wake up until 3 or 4, she added with satisfaction. Kyle laughed, a sound filled with contempt and amusement. "Man, you weren't kidding about this guy being pathetic. Look at him just sitting there," he said mockingly. "Tell me about it. Sometimes I wonder what I ever saw in him. He's so predictable, so boring," she replied with cruel dismissal. They were discussing me like I was a piece of furniture. The disrespect, the casual cruelty, the complete absence of any recognition that I was a human being who had loved and trusted them both. It crystallized every ounce of rage I'd been building for weeks into something cold and focused. "Come on," Allison said seductively, her voice dropping to the sultry tone she used to use with me. "We've got time." They kissed 5 feet from where I sat unconscious, their hands roaming each other's bodies with the familiarity of established lovers. Kyle's hands were in her hair, on her waist, places that had once been mine alone to touch. They headed toward the bedroom, Allison's laughter echoing down the hallway. Kyle said something else that I couldn't make out, but their combined laughter felt like acid on every nerve ending. I counted to 30, then stood. My movements were silent and deliberate. I walked through our kitchen to the door leading to the attached garage. My hands didn't shake as I retrieved the Louisville Slugger baseball bat I'd bought 3 years ago after a rash of break-ins in our neighborhood. 34 inches of solid ash wood. I'd told myself it was for home security. Tonight it would serve exactly that purpose. I walked back through the house, past the living room where I'd been drugged, down the hallway where family photos showed happier times that I now knew were illusions. The bedroom door was open about 6 inches. I could hear them inside. Allison's voice, Kyle's deeper tones, the sounds of betrayal happening in my bed, in my home, in the life I'd built. I pushed the door wide open. They were on the bed, Kyle on top of Allison, both naked, both completely absorbed in their betrayal. The sheets were the ones I'd bought for our anniversary. The pillows were where I laid my head every night. They froze when they saw me standing in the doorway. Neither of them screamed immediately. There was a moment of pure, crystalline silence where the reality of their situation hit them like ice water. Kyle's eyes went wide. Allison's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I didn't say a word. There was nothing to discuss. I swung the bat. Crack. The sound of ash wood connecting with Kyle's ribs was sharp and final. The impact reverberated up through the bat into my hands, a sensation I felt in my bones. Kyle screamed, a high-pitched sound of shock and agony, and rolled off Allison, hitting the floor beside the bed. "Derek, stop!" Allison screamed in pure panic, but I was beyond hearing her. I swung again, this time hitting Kyle's left leg just above the knee. The crack of breaking bone was audible throughout the room. His femur snapped with a sound like a tree branch breaking in a storm. Kyle was sobbing now, trying to crawl away from me, one leg dragging uselessly behind him. Blood was coming from his mouth where broken ribs had likely punctured something internal. "Please, stop, please, I'm sorry," he begged desperately. Sorry, as if apologies could undo months of betrayal, of drugging, laughing at my unconscious body, while they violated my home and my marriage. I grabbed Kyle by the arm and dragged him, naked, broken, bleeding, down the hallway toward the front door. His screams echoed off the walls, probably audible to our neighbors, but I didn't care. Let them hear. Let them know what happens to men who think they can destroy other men's lives without consequences. Kyle left a trail of blood on our hardwood floors as I dragged him. When we reached the door, I opened it wide, revealing the well-lit hallway of our upscale condominium complex. "If you're not gone in 60 seconds, I said quietly, "I'll kill you." I meant it. Kyle could hear that I meant it. He crawled out into the hallway, naked and broken, sobbing and bleeding, trying to pull himself toward the elevator with one functioning leg. I watched him for a moment, then slammed the door and locked it. When I turned around, Allison was standing at the end of the hallway, clutching a bedsheet around herself, tears streaming down her face. "Derek, please," she whispered desperately. "I'm sorry, it was a mistake. I made a terrible mistake. Please don't," she begged. I walked toward her. She backed away, but there was nowhere to go. "Derek, I love you. I've always loved you. This thing with Kyle, it didn't mean anything. It was just... I was confused. I was lonely," she pleaded frantically. I grabbed her by the hair and dragged her toward the door. Her feet scrambled for purchase on the floor, the sheet falling away, her screams filling our home. "Derek, no, you can't do this. I live here. This is my home too," she screamed in protest. I opened the front door and shoved her out into the hallway where Kyle's blood was still wet on the carpet. I threw her clothes after her, the black dress, her underwear, her shoes, everything landing in a pile beside her naked, sobbing form. "Don't come back," I said firmly. I slammed the door and engaged every lock, deadbolt, chain, door alarm. The silence that followed was the most peaceful sound I'd heard in months. Allison pounded on the door, screaming, begging, threatening to call the police. I sat on the couch, the same couch where she'd drugged me dozens of times, and called Nathan. "It's done," I said when he answered. "I have everything on camera. I'm pressing charges." Nathan's voice was tight with concern. "Derek, what did you do?" he asked anxiously. "I defended my home against trespassers. Everything is documented. Call the police. Tell them I have video evidence of assault, drug administration, and criminal trespass. Tell them the perpetrators are likely in need of medical attention," I explained calmly. I ended the call and immediately uploaded the evening's security footage to the cloud servers Nathan had arranged. Every moment was captured in high definition. Allison checking my pulse, Kyle entering without permission, their casual discussion of drugging me, and my entirely justified response to finding criminals in my home. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Allison had managed to get dressed by then, but Kyle was still in the hallway, naked and semi-conscious, leaving a spreading pool of blood on the expensive carpet our homeowners association would have to replace. Officer Maria Santos took my statement while paramedics worked on Kyle. I showed her the security footage on my phone, the forensic report proving I'd been systematically drugged, and the financial records documenting months of deception. "Mr. Haynes," she said after reviewing everything, "you understand you could be charged with assault?" she asked seriously. "Officer Santos," I replied calmly, "I found 2 criminals in my home after being drugged unconscious. One of them was trespassing, the other was systematically poisoning me. I defended myself and my property. Everything is documented," I explained matter-of-factly. She nodded slowly. "We'll need you to come to the station for a full statement," she informed me. "Of course, should I call my attorney?" I asked politely. "That would be advisable," she replied professionally. 2 days later, Allison was arrested at her parents' house. The charges were extensive: assault with intent to harm, reckless endangerment, illegal drug administration, and conspiracy to commit assault. The evidence was overwhelming, the forensic reports conclusive, the video footage undeniable. Kyle was arrested at the hospital where he was recovering from emergency surgery to repair his shattered leg and internal bleeding from broken ribs. His charges included criminal trespass, conspiracy to commit assault, and accessory to drug administration. His personal training career was over. His athletic activities were finished. He would walk with a permanent limp for the rest of his life. The district attorney offered them both plea deals to avoid the expense and publicity of a trial. Allison accepted 3 years in state prison. Kyle took 18 months, though his medical expenses would bankrupt him long before his sentence was complete. I filed for divorce immediately. With Allison's criminal conviction and documented adultery, the proceedings were straightforward. I kept everything: the condo, our savings, all marital assets. Allison was left with nothing but a prison sentence and a criminal record that would follow her forever. Richard and Joan Porter called me the week after Allison's sentencing. "Derek," Joan's voice was broken, aged by shame, "we're so sorry. We had no idea what she was capable of. We've cut her off completely. She's not welcome in our home," she said with deep regret. I appreciated the gesture but felt nothing toward them. They were collateral damage in their daughter's destruction, but they weren't my concern anymore. As I watched Allison being led away in handcuffs, she looked back at me one last time. There was no apology in her eyes, just shock that she got caught. I felt nothing but satisfaction. 2 months after Allison's conviction, I sold the condo. Too many bad memories lived in those walls: the couch where I'd been drugged, the bedroom where I'd been betrayed. I bought a small house in a quiet suburb 30 minutes away. Fresh start, clean slate. I began therapy. Dr. Alexander Hall helped me process the trauma, not just the betrayal, but the violence of my response. I didn't regret what I did, but I acknowledged it changed me. I was harder now, more guarded, less willing to trust. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my marriage. They were supportive, if somewhat shocked by the story. Most said I did what I had to do. A few suggested I went too far. I didn't care about their opinions. I started dating again, carefully, slowly. I was upfront about my past. Some women were scared off. Others found my honesty refreshing. I took my time. There was no rush. Financially, I was thriving. The divorce settlement left me with everything. I invested wisely, continued working at Westbridge Financial. My boss knew the full story and had been supportive. I occasionally checked in on Allison and Kyle through public records. Allison was serving her sentence at a women's correctional facility. No early release likely. Kyle tried suing me for the injuries, but dropped the case when my attorney reminded him that he was trespassing and committing a crime at the time. Kyle now worked at a supplement store, his training career destroyed by both his injuries and his criminal record. I felt no guilt, no remorse. They drugged me, violated my home, laughed at my unconscious body. They earned every consequence they received. In my final reflection, I address you directly. I'm 39, divorced, and free. Some people say I went too far, that I should have just called the police. But those people weren't drugged. They weren't betrayed in their own bed. They don't get to judge. My advice is simple: if someone betrays you, document everything. Protect yourself legally, and make sure they face consequences. Justice isn't always gentle. Sometimes it's delivered with a steel baseball bat, but it's necessary. I'm at peace now, building a new life on my own terms. The foundation is solid this time because it's built on truth, not lies. Trust is the foundation of marriage, but when that trust is poisoned, sometimes you need to burn everything down and start over. I did, and I've never looked back.